Yes, we've picked up an atmospheric disturbance caused by an unexplained increase in anomaly activity. You're scheduled to leave tomorrow. We're not sure if this is going to cause a potential problem for the flight. I thought you should be given the choice to back out.
No way, sir. I'm ready for this, no matter what.
Greetings, Kerbonauts! This is Kerbal Space Program. I'm Bob Fitch, and this is episode number 33 of Project Odyssey, in which we have a whole bunch to do. I'm beginning with another launch of a lander. This is the Duna Luxury Living Quarters. We're going to test it out on the moon, just like we did with the Duna Harvester that's already over there. I'm going to go over with this lander and put it down on the moon right next to the existing base and just expand the size of that base. You can see that I've had to use the MechJeb Smart ASS window in order to get this off the ground, just like I did with the other lander, because the frame rate drops down to about 8 to 10 frames per second, and it can be a little difficult to maneuver it. So until we get away from the KSC that has a lot of little things around there that render and slow stuff down, I use that window. Also, you'll notice off in the distance that atmospheric disturbance that Krantz was telling Svetlana about. We have these strange energy surges all over the place coming from anomalies, and we're going to have to be careful with our launches, because who knows what's going to happen if we get struck by one of these plasma discharges. We may want to send an unmanned craft to specifically go and investigate them, though, find out what's going on with those atmospheric disturbances caused by the anomalies. Or we may need to investigate the source of the sudden anomaly surge just in general. What caused that that's making this happen? And as I said, we have to get the Duna Luxury Living Quarters to the moon and land it, but we also have to try to find Hadfield's wormhole exit, since it's getting close to his window of arrival. We could also look into bringing up new supplies to the Odyssey station. Svetlana herself needs to take a mini lander and go land at the new base on the moon and go do some setup. Or we could upgrade to 0.90 of KSP. Just kidding. I'm not going to upgrade to 0.90 because so far this 32-bit version of 0.25 has been working just fine. I have no reason to switch. Well, it looks like our luxury living quarters are in orbit, and we did much better than the one simulation launch that I did just before this, which I'm showing you right here. As you can see, we lifted off just fine, but I had forgotten how difficult it is to maneuver this massive beast of a launcher. Just like the Duna Harvester that's already gone to the moon, this one weighs a lot. I was using the Smart ASS window to try to move it once I remembered that, but it just wasn't enough. It wasn't moving fast enough, and so we went more into a straight up trajectory than we did into a gravity turn, and this doesn't have a lot of room to maneuver in terms of its delta V. If I don't go into a gravity turn, it doesn't make it to orbit. And you can see that right here. Our poor little Duna Luxury Living Quarters getting torn apart by deadly re-entry and overheating. Well, it's no matter. It was a simulation launch anyway. Everything else on that flight had gone really well up until that point, and so that's why on the very next launch I just thought, oh, I'll do a better gravity turn and this will be a real launch. So we went up, and that brings us back to here. We had gotten this part up into orbit, well, almost into orbit. We're still at 41 kilometers. We need to give it a little boost, and now we're in orbit. And after that, we just need to decouple, flip around, and head the other direction. And once that happens, you know what that means. It means that now we get to watch as another piece heads backward down into the atmosphere and gets torn apart once again by overheating, deadly re-entry, the atmosphere ripping it to shreds. So did you happen to notice right there, or at any point while we were watching this second stage here, the engine effects have been improved again? I was using some space shuttle engine fire effects instead of what it had been before, which I thought looked kind of ugly, and I had said that I wanted to work on that a little bit, and I did, and that's the one that I came up with, those space shuttle type engines. Well, here we go, back into the atmosphere. Any second now, this stage will be destroyed and we can go on to the next launch or landing. Which it looks like it's going to be a launch, of course, because there's a transfer stage that's required to help boost us to whatever orbit we're going to go to, Duna, the moon, whatever it might be. That payload that we sent up in the launch right before this, it's so heavy we have to have a separate Kerbin departure stage that docks up with it. So that's what's going right now. And with so much to try to get done in this episode, I think we're just going to skip ahead to the deployment of our payload, but we can't skip that because look how cool it is when you see those fairings burst away with those new retro rockets that I can attach on the inside with those special plates that I've welded right into them. Very, very cool. Look at that thing go off into the distance. I love it. Then we have to decouple it from that launch stage. It's attached in there directly from that decoupler to the docking port. Then after that, we can flip that lower stage around and head it back into the atmosphere.
Computer, open a frequency to Odyssey Station.
This is Odyssey Station.
Kessla, this is Krantz. Are you seeing these plasma discharges all across Kerbin?
Yes, we've been tracking them. I think the origin is from Eve of this dimension.
Really? Interesting. You know, we have a launch window open for Eve. If we have a satellite ready, we could send something to go investigate.
I think Bob did have something.
Okay, I'll give him a call next. Thanks. Krantz out.
Okay, Kerbinauts, 3 guesses. What's in the payload area of that fairing? Ooh, I wonder. We just saw a video about them talking about going to Eve, and now he's launching a rocket. What could possibly be in that fairing? Well, yeah, that's not a hard one. We have a satellite in there, and that satellite is headed to Eve. We need to find out why all of these weird plasma discharges are coming here to Kerbin when there's something that was at Eve, some kind of anomaly there, that's causing it. We haven't really focused much attention in that direction because there really just wasn't much reason to. We know we need to go to Duna because that's where the artifact is, but what could possibly draw us to Eve? I guess we're going to be finding out soon. The payload is loaded with scientific instruments that should help us to analyze what's going on over there. The only thing that I didn't include was an atmosphere scoop because I just didn't really see the need to analyze any of their atmosphere. We only needed that scoop to go to Jewel. Ah, there it is now, the payload, exposed to space with the burn underway in order to get us into a slightly higher orbit. You can see some of the instruments there up on top. It's basically following that same, I'm going to put a bunch of stuff inside a box strategy, because every now and then I like those kinds of satellites too. I don't know what it is about those. It's like you can't see any of it from the outside, but just knowing that it's in there is really cool. For the lower stage, I had gone in here and grabbed this 3.75 meter short core booster, and that's what's down here. We have that, and then I put this fairing on to cover up this one over here. We have our 2.75 meter second stage, and that's what this one was. So if we take away those and we bring ourselves up into there, I just said 2.75, didn't I? It's obviously 3.75 meter second stage. Says it right there. Anyway, we had that sitting on this extra decoupler. I just like the look of that a little bit better. I think it looks more like a real payload decoupler right there. So even though I have the fairing base that I put under there as well, like sometimes I can put one of these smaller ones or the expanded one. See how that looks where it sits on there? My alternative is, I'll just take that off and show you. We'll pull that one away and put this on there instead. There we go. So now if you look at it, see how it just has a big gap in there and it doesn't look like it's attached to anything. That's why I like to use this other decoupler right here and put that in between. As far as using this one right here, I don't use it. I set the staging icon for it above the staging icon for this one. And what that means is when this one decouples, this one just goes away with it and I never have to worry about it ever again. Now we get to take a look at the payload. Here's where all the scientific instruments are. I figured if I was going over there anyway, I might as well do a scan for Kethite. We will go into a polar orbit and let this thing do its job there. Meanwhile, we'll also be scanning the terrain with these 2 terrain scanners and this biome scanner over here. The communications are right there, and you can see it's got more lights all over the outside of it, as well as some RCS thrusters like right here, and a few down here as well. The engine on the bottom of the cube, using a little bit of that same sort of methodology as the CubeSat mod does. This is just a box. And like I said, sometimes I like these box style satellites just because they're sort of like eggs. They have this awesome gooey center. Ooh. So I will pull all of the top off at once right there in one big plate and let you see down into the core. We have fuel tanks, gyroscope, CPU, battery power. I just love that. Also on the outside of it, these little handles are how it was assembled. When the Kerbals are placing this all together, one will grab onto this handle and one will grab onto that handle and they'll stick it on there, and then a third Kerbal will come up and he'll use a drill with a ratchet attachment on the top and he'll just bolt that thing all together with those honeycomb plates on the outside. And there it is. That's it. Back in orbit, it is time to make the burn that takes us over to Eve. We have our low Kerbin orbit right now, but we need to do our Kerbin departure burn. So I need to figure out what maneuver node I want that will bring me as close to Eve as possible directly from Kerbin, because I only have about 950 delta V on the satellite itself for making its capture, and I can't do a super deep in the atmosphere aerobraking maneuver because I don't want to damage it by overheating it or anything. So we'll use our second stage, and before we decouple it, try and burn as much fuel from it as we possibly can. After that, we'll release the payload and do a tiny adjustment to get ourselves as close, once again, like I said, as close to Eve as we possibly can be, because we're so far away right now. Minor adjustments will make a big difference. So right here, I'm going to switch out to the big map view and watch very intently for when my escape from Kerbin occurs. I'll see the new orbit and then be careful to not overshoot. There it is. It has now come around. We have that orange colored orbit that represents where we're going, and I'm going to keep pushing that until we see it intercepting Eve. Once it intercepts, I can zoom in a little bit closer and look at it from really up close to Eve to try and get that periapsis down really close to the atmosphere. And once we're really close, I'm going to be using my RCS to make tiny adjustments. Now normally, to be totally efficient with a maneuver node, what you're supposed to try to do is burst as much of your delta V right at the node point as you possibly can. But because we can't do that, engines take a while to burn, sometimes in the order of minutes, we do half the burn before and half the burn after the maneuver node. Well, in this case, I had gone a little bit too far past my node, so I needed to create a second one that was about 2 minutes ahead on my orbit that I would use to then refine my location a little bit more. So that's what I've done now, and now we can finally decouple that Kerbin departure stage and use the satellite to do a third tiny adjustment to bring our orbit up to right underneath Eve. Wait, no. We're going to do one more little itty bitty burn with the departure stage before we've used any fuel from the satellite, because it looks like I have a bit more space there that I can maneuver. And as long as we have fuel on that, we might as well use it rather than using the satellite fuel. Okay, there we go. Now we're up nice and close. I like that much better. So now how about we go back to Kerbin now, decouple and deploy our communications devices and solar panels, make sure the solar panels get pointed toward the sun for our long journey, and then we can do, I guess, what will be a fourth maneuver, this time using the satellite, because even the decoupling of the satellite from the stage may have affected the trajectory relative to Eve. One thing that I try to do whenever I'm maneuvering something in a really fine-tuning sort of mode, like what we're about to do here, is I flip the RCS off and on only when I need it, and I flip the SAS off and on as well, because what you'll find is if you have your RCS and your SAS on at the same time, then your satellite will sometimes jitter a little bit, because the SAS is trying to keep you pointed where you're supposed to go, and as it's doing that, it's using the RCS to do little itty-bitty bursts. And those bursts can change where you're going, especially when you're so far away like we are. A tiny little 0.01 delta V burst of RCS could throw us off by 100,000 kilometers on where we're going. And then when it finally comes time to point toward the sun or set our angle of our craft so that the retro burn is already set up from really far away, I will often turn off the SAS and the RCS at the same time, maneuver it using only the gyroscope, and then once it gets in the position, making sure the RCS is still off so nothing gets affected, then I will flip on the SAS right there. I do the same thing when I'm dealing with any satellites that want to stay in specific orbits, like the 6-hour orbit of a geostationary orbit for my remote tech communications network. If I want to keep that at exactly 6 hours, then one thing you need to do is make sure the RCS is turned off. That way, if you ever switch to that satellite to take a look at it, the RCS won't throw your satellite off by a few seconds. And as we've talked about in the past, if your satellite is off by even a second, over time, it will drift considerably. Alrighty, while we were launching the Eve science mission, our Kerbin departure stage that will take the luxury living quarters over to the moon for the reference mission made its rendezvous. So now we get a chance to dock it up. It's a good thing too, because it was starting to run a little bit low on power, but when the solar panels come out, we'll be bringing in plenty of power to recharge all the batteries. Before we continue with this mission, we are going to wait for the Odyssey station launch window to arrive. I'm really tired of switching scenes and getting that error message, which isn't really an error message at all, telling me that the Odyssey space station is running low on supplies. I know that it's not running low, it's just some quirk about how when something is on rails and not processing, the life support is getting drained, but then it gets recovered again by the recyclers when I actually switch to it, but it thinks that it's drained until then. So we're going to send up a new supply craft to the Odyssey station. It is a much larger craft than the last time I sent supplies up there. Last time, we sent a little craft that, because it was small, I had called it the Firefly Resupply mission. Well, this one is much bigger, and we're going to call this one the Medusa Supply mission. I didn't intend for it to be spinning as much as it is, but it doesn't seem to be hurting anything either, so I just went ahead with the launch like that, and I didn't bother trying to figure out what was causing the spinning. When we left the ground, the launcher weighed in at about 320 tons. The Medusa carrier itself is only about 7,600 kilograms. It carries 460 kilograms of food, 150 of water, and 970 kilograms of resupply fuel. It can also take away from the station over 1,000 kilograms of waste. I probably shouldn't have released the fairing while we're still throttled up as high as we are, because that was holding it stable. As you can see, we're shaking like Chunk from the Goonies. But as soon as I throttled back a little bit, it got quite a bit better. Now we have to take this up into a higher orbit, because I was waiting for my launch window, but I wasn't waiting for the station itself. The station had been really far ahead. That leaves me with two choices. I can either go into a lower orbit and catch up quickly on the station, or I can go into a higher one and have the station catch up to me, but it will take a lot longer. And you would think the lower orbit might be better because I'll be there quicker. But I had so much fuel still in that initial stage that I decided to go into the higher orbit to use up some of that and conserve as much as I could from the payload itself. We're capable of delivering this payload into low orbit, sure, but it could go all the way to the moon, it could go to Minmus if we wanted to, it could go all the way to Duna. The little stage we have on the bottom there is how we get our extra delta V that would allow us to do those long distance travels. We'll decouple that as soon as we're done with it, and we'll send that back to be destroyed. And then the payload will head off by itself to the station. Now, right now, I am looking to position myself into an orbit that goes higher than where our target is, but also intercepts the orbit of the target at one point down below. Doing that is allowing me to reduce my orbit once I'm down in that area where the two orbits connect together, and that'll allow me to get in one orbit around the planet and intercept with our target. So, another thing that I've been working on lately is restoring some more of those sets that I accidentally deleted, which means I can go back and do some more interludes.
Still nothing, sir.
Screen off. There has to be some kind of sign of something down there.
Hasn't the prisoner told us anything?
So far, he's not talking. Get down there and interrogate him one more time.
You're going to talk this time, Bill.
I'm not saying anything, I've told you.
Well, we'll see after you've been introduced to a little creature we discovered on Alpha Ceti 7.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good at all. I can't imagine what they might have picked up on that planet. Maybe something that you attach to the victim that forces them to tell the truth or makes them susceptible to suggestion. In any case, I don't think Bill is going to be having a good day. Meanwhile, back here around our Kerbin, we have two launches going at the same time. As you recall, we have the Resupply mission that's heading over to Odyssey Station, and we also have the Duna Luxury Lander that we're going to go test on the moon. The trip to the station for the supplies should be a relatively straightforward rendezvous, docking, transfer, decouple, and deorbit. The transfer over to the moon is using our nifty new little nuclear engines, 3 of them on the bottom of the transfer stage. Extremely efficient engines, much more efficient than the ones that come in stock KSP, well, in the vacuum at least. Down, if they were in atmosphere, they are much, much worse than the ones that come in stock KSP. But unlike stock, mine operate on liquid hydrogen only, which means I need much larger tanks to supply all of that liquid hydrogen to that boost stage. Alright, so in that upper left window, I'm not quite sure what I was thinking when I made my approach, but I came in way too fast. I forgot to check how long the maneuver was going to take and to start the maneuver early enough. And once I realize how fast I'm coming in, it's too late. I flip on my MechJeb Smart ASS to try and spin around as fast as I can by saying target relative minus on the velocity, but it's much too little, much too late, and we go zipping past the station. It's fortunate that we didn't collide and destroy it. I continue making my spin, rotating around with that target relative minus, throwing on the engine and trying to recover my position, getting back to that station as fast as I can, because I don't want to spend forever trying to dock this up. But in order to do this maneuver, we have to thrust back toward the station and increase our relative velocity once again, which means we're going to have to slow down very carefully when we get to the station again, or the same thing could happen. We could overshoot it going way too fast. But this time I flip around much earlier, get myself oriented correctly, and then keep my eye on that time to close approach in the bottom of my flight computer window. By maintaining that at between, say, 8 and 12 seconds, I know that I'm not going to be coming in too fast. I have a few docking ports to choose from on the station right here. I didn't show it, but I tabbed over, took a look around, and decided where this would fit well, and then came back to the payload and began the move to bring it down under the station. We're going to come up from underneath it and dock it there. Here's our supply craft. You can see a 320-ton lifter and 6229 meters per second on total vacuum delta V. That's why I was saying earlier that this could go just about anywhere I want it to go. The bottom stage here looks reminiscent of an Ariane, and that's on purpose because the payload itself is essentially an ATV as well. The only thing is, since I already had a 2.5 meter frigate booster that I had pre-built, I used that down in the bottom instead of using an EPS that would require me creating something entirely new. Not to mention, this looks a little bit like an EPS anyway, so why not use it? So once that one decouples, then we get up here into the payload itself, which you can see is preloaded with 1500 food and 150 water, some UDMH and N2O. I set those to not be transferable, that way it wouldn't accidentally drain any of that down into the engines. This compartment down here is where I want to get any of that from, so you can see there's its fuel and electrical power is down in this propulsion stage. This is just intended to be my cargo, and then when it's all done, I can load it up with 1500 waste and return that back to Kerbin. By welding together, I created my own little Medusa bipropellant RCS over here. You can see that it uses the UDMH and NTO as its propellant. So there's no hydrazine on this one. This one uses that UDMH for the 4 engines down here, as well as all of the thrusters up here as well as down here. I had to create a special version of those. So you can see here's my original hydrazine thrusters, and here's my RCS that uses the UDMH. It's the same model in both cases. And then over here, welded together, is this one, and this one all at the same time, which gives this model and allows multiple directions of RCS attitude control right there. On the back side of it right here is where I have my antenna hiding. This pops up like that when I want to put it in communication with our remote tech network. All around the side of it, what do you see here? More lights. And then at the top of it, we have our docking port right there. The kind that actually has a little extender probe. You can click on that right there to see that. It pops open and then like that. So what would happen is this would go in like this into the target receiving port, and then it would lock down by pulling it tight right there like that. Back in orbit, we still have these 2 missions going at the same time. The supplies in the upper left and the Duna luxury lander heading to the moon in the bottom right. We're still conducting our departure burn in the bottom right, so we're going to switch down there and take a look at that approach next. These are not your average everyday nuclear engines on the bottom here. Altogether, they have much more thrust than what you would normally find on an engine as well. So yeah, completely unbalanced, but yet at the same time, because of that huge amount of liquid hydrogen I need, it ends up being relatively realistic when you compare it to something like, say, the Constellation mission that should go to Mars. Well, there's our moon intercept. Now it's just a matter of waiting.
So what you're telling me is the pinhole we've opened into whatever dimension Svetlana has gone to may be visible to the people of the other side?
Yes, sir, that's exactly what I'm saying. Our attempts to track them and break through require amplifying the power with a large gravity well, such as Eve. This will have the same effect on the anomalies, namely amplifying them, and the effects will be unmistakable as abnormal anomaly activity. And if they investigate, then they may discover the true source of the strange energy waves.
And now it is time once again for the orbital ballet known as docking. In fact, this can be somewhat meditative if you let it. Here, let's try something. Look at your screen and just let the whole world fade away. Take a deep breath in through your nose, blow it slowly out through your mouth, and just relax. And now we return to the luxury lander on its way to the moon. With just a quick little time warp, we can get ourselves over into the SOI and see where we're going to be coming down. There's a slight glitch with this payload that I haven't tried to figure out yet, and I'll tell you why in a second. First, the glitch is that if you look in the upper left, it keeps on saying local control for my remote tech connection to this payload. Ooh, and check this out first, actually. We happen to be coming down right over our landing site, and I would love to take credit for planning that ahead of time, but it was just luck. The landing site happened to be exactly where we needed to be, so we're going to go into a landing pattern trajectory from right where we are. Now, as I was saying about the local control problem, one of the modules, and I haven't tried to look for which one yet, one of the modules in that payload that has a command power does not have the remote tech SPU attached to it as well, which is what turns something from local control into remote tech controlled. So what I'm going to need to do is go back through all of the modules that I've attached to this, or all of the parts that is, and check the modules on all the parts on this. Any of them that have a command module, I need to double check and see which ones don't have the SPU module. And if I can find the right one and attach the SPU to it, then it'll switch from local control back to remote tech control like it should be. And the reason I haven't bothered to look for the problem is that every single time I'm watching the orbital view, I see a nice yellow line indicating that there is a connection if I had needed it. There is a connection going from my remote tech network to the payload. So essentially, if I had fixed the bug before landing, it wouldn't have had any difference whatsoever on my ability to maintain control. We stayed in communications the entire time. Well, we are getting pretty close to our landing site now. Along the way, I have been using that stage that has the liquid hydrogen and the nuclear engines. It's still attached, so I'm using it to make little maneuvers still, angling to get my end point of the descent trajectory lined up with our landing site. Well, there goes our fairing and our nuclear stage. We're on a suborbital trajectory right now, so those should be coming down and exploding somewhere a little bit further beyond the landing zone. I'm not too worried about the nuclear radiation. Kerbals are designed to take a little bit extra nuclear radiation here and there. It looks like we're still coming down exactly where we want to be, so it's time for a flyby. Look at that beautiful payload making its way very quickly toward the surface. We're going to have to orient our engines down toward the surface to slow down our descent, while also allowing us to catch back up on the landing zone. Because by stopping our orbital velocity as quickly as we were, we started to fall a little bit short of the landing zone, but just a slight change in our angle gets that all fixed up. And with that, we are now coming down right over the landing zone. Will we be able to land exactly where we want to? We want to put this down right next to the other landers. It looks like we are coming down right on top of where we want to be. In fact, wait. We're coming down like right on top of where we want to be. Oh, no. I'm trying to push back up again. Shift it out of the way. Oh, uh-oh. I meant to do that. Yeah. Well, next time on Project Odyssey, we will fix our lander position. We will do a little deployment. We'll see if we can get Svetlana over here to the moon. And we'll work on finally intercepting at Jewel to get Hadfield's medicine. Until next time, I will see you later, Kerbonauts.